after what many are calling an electric second day at the Democratic National Convention with the Obamas. More big names from the blue camp will take the stage on the third day of the event.
Absolutely, Shivan. Addressing the crowd at the United Center in Chicago, former President Bill Clinton laid out the case for a Kamala Harris presidency. Clinton also took multiple shots at Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump, accusing him of creating chaos. Clinton said, and I quote, "He's still dividing, he's still blaming, he's still belittling other people, he creates chaos and then he sort of curates it as if it were a precious art."
Former House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi also addressed the convention. Pelosi started her speech by thanking Joe Biden and praising his presidency. She then went on to attack Trump, accusing him of trying to steal democracy on the 6th of January 2021.
Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, who Kamala Harris has picked as her running mate, will formally accept the vice presidential nomination and address the convention. According to reports, Walz will be introduced by former student Ben Ingman and U.S. Senator Amy Klobuchar. The 60-year-old military veteran got a resounding endorsement from former U.S. President Barack Obama on day 2 of the convention.
He knows who he is, and he knows what's important. You can tell those flannel shirts he wears don't come from some political consultant. They come from his closet, and they have been through some stuff.
Outside the convention, hundreds of pro-Palestinian protesters, including parents with children atop their shoulders, streamed into Union Park on the third day of the Democratic National Convention.
And it came one night after violent clashes between police and demonstrators, which is the night before that led to 56 arrests.
Meanwhile, Republican presidential candidate and nominee Donald Trump held his first outdoor rally since last month's attempted assassination. He spoke at the North Carolina event from behind a podium surrounded by veins of bulletproof glass. Trump attacked Kamala Harris' approach to national security, claiming she will destroy the country. This rally is part of his week-long trip across the country in what seems to be an attempt to draw attention away from the Democrats and their national convention.
And well, for more on this, we're now being joined by correspondent Susan Tehrani. She's joining us live from New York. Hi, Susan. It is day 3 of the DNC. We saw Nancy Pelosi and Bill Clinton address the gathering there. Harris's running mate, Tim Walz, is expected to deliver his keynote address. Given how historic this race is panning out to be, how do you think his speech today will impact Harris's chances for the White House? And what do you expect from Tim Walz's speech?
So Tim Walz is going to be delivering this speech in front of his home state, and he has the largest number of uncommitted delegates than any other state. So his own home state, 11 delegates have decided to vote present and not commit to Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. Part of the reason for that is because they had hoped that they would be more sympathetic to the quote-unquote Palestinian cause. So he has his job cut out for him, but also Tim Walz is not a household name. He doesn't have much of a name recognition, and the amount that he does have, it's only started about 2 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, less than a month ago. So he's going to have to introduce himself to the American public. He has to portray that image of Midwestern, so-called folksy dad that the Democratic Party wants him to portray. But on the other hand, you know, there are a lot of questions that still remain regarding policy. We're not going to hear about that, but it's going to be very important to see how Tim Walz presents himself and whether or not he will be embraced, not by the Democrats, but by those independent voters and other people who are watching to see who is Tim Walz.
Susan, we tracked the Republican National Convention all through those days, and now we're seeing the Democratic National Convention. If we were to compare the kind of momentum they had gained that time, at the RNC, it was soon after the assassination attempt. Of course, a lot of it revolved around that. But overall, when we look at the DNC right now, we've had such big names speaking and addressing and talking about Kamala Harris. What kind of a boost do you feel it brings to her campaign when the president, of course, is speaking? But then you also have the Obamas, who are as big even now. Then you have the Clintons, who've also come forward, and they've come forward and backed Kamala Harris and her campaign. When you look at Kamala Harris' campaign and the kind of momentum it is gaining, do you find it to be more than optics? I remember you had mentioned that one has to look at it with caution, whatever the polls are suggesting. But as of now, do you feel that there is that momentum is genuinely there as much as it is being perceived?
Yeah, I mean, talk about big names. We just learned that Oprah Winfrey is going to be addressing the crowd shortly, possibly before Tim Walz. And ultimately, the final night, performers like Pink are going to come out and perform. Tonight, you had John Legend. Democrats have always been very in tune with not only pop culture, but also having these big names appear at their conventions. The real test for Harris is going to be after Thursday, when she hits the road and when she'll finally have to talk about her policies and try to at least differentiate them a little bit from Joe Biden's, which, he was very unpopular. But nonetheless, when you look at this crowd, they're very energetic. It would be a very different crowd if Joe Biden was the nominee. There is no doubt that there is electricity, there is excitement right now in the room, and Kamala Harris has really done that. But ultimately, again, I would look at these polls with cautious optimism, because these conventions can really be electrifying when they're happening, as was the RNC.
Yes.
But once these candidates hit the road and once they have to answer those tough questions, that's when we'll really know, how popular each candidate is. But as for now, she's enjoying the ride.
Right, Susan, talking about the issues, while DNC is underway, former U.S. President Trump and his running mate Vance, they have attacked the Democrats over national security issues. And latest polls also suggest that Democrats have been vulnerable when it comes to the economy or border. So I want to seek your assessment that what does Harris need to do to prove to Americans that she can perhaps be trusted to handle all these issues?
Yeah, I mean, regarding the border, she has a very tough job ahead of her. Border security, notably the southern border, is one of the most pressing issues for American voters. Each city right now is a border city, with the illegal migrants taking over and the border being open. And Kamala Harris was put in charge by President Joe Biden of the southern border. She never visited the southern border, actually. And, there's this talk about how she was the border czar. Now they're saying she wasn't the border czar, but she was in charge at least to find the root causes of what's happening to the southern border. She was very unsuccessful regarding that. She's trying to portray herself as someone who's going to be tough on crime, tough on the immigration issue. We'll have to see if she'll convince the voters. And then the economy. Today we heard that the Labor Department actually overplayed the jobs report, and it had created almost 1 million less jobs than it reported back in March. This, once again, puts the American voter in a very tough spot, saying that, okay, then I was really feeling the pinch, despite the fact that this administration was telling me that the economy is okay. So she'll have to work on that as well. For now, her economic policies has been criticized across the board, even from the Washington Post and the New York Times, who are usually favorable to Democrats. There is concern about the policies that she's put up front regarding the economy. We'll have to wait and see how she wants to mend that. And, she has to talk to people. At this point, it's only been delegates and surrogates who have been talking on her behalf. Ultimately, she has to come and address the American public.
Absolutely. And, as far as Pomp and Show is concerned, they're ticking all the boxes, but it's very soon going to boil down to the real issues, and that's where, the decision is going to be made for the next president of the United States. Thank you so much, Susan, but we are going to come back to you in this next story as well. Stay with us.